My name is Nancy O'Hagan. I am the founder and president of the Caring for Carcinoid Foundation. I am a metastatic carcinoid patient. I have carcinoid cancer that is of unknown origin, it started in the gastrointestinal tract and metastasized so that my liver is almost full of tumor, and I have extensive metastases of solid tumor throughout my body and in my bones. So on a daily basis, there's a great deal of pain that I encounter, and as many of you patients have to endure as well. When I was first diagnosed, it was kind of a funny story because I was working as a tax lawyer here in Boston. For most of my career, I worked in Palo Alto, California. I'm a San Diego native, and I was a tax lawyer there in Palo Alto, and then I was experiencing symptoms of flushing and some pain in my bones, but no one was able to diagnose the problem, as many of you patients experience before your ultimate diagnosis. And then here in Boston, I was working as a tax lawyer for a firm downtown called Goodwin Procter. And that week I had to give a presentation. I had a lot of clients that needed to have their work finished, and I was running on very little sleep and very little food. And so I actually was taking the subway to work, and I collapsed on the subway. And then I went home, and it was a very upsetting situation, as I'm sure it is for everyone. What I was most concerned with after my diagnosis was with how my parents were going to react and how my husband was going to react. We had just been married for 1 year, and he was at Harvard Business School, and I came back and he was sitting on the couch, and I said, they just diagnosed me with cancer and I only have a few months to live. And then I called my dad, who was working in San Diego, and it was an incredibly traumatic time, as it is for all of us who are diagnosed with cancer, and we tell our loved ones what happens. There's just incredible consternation, sorrow, and fear. So my primary care physician was able to request an appointment for me with an oncologist the very next day. And I went to see this oncologist, and he immediately deduced that I had carcinoid and not metastatic liver cancer. So after being in a fair amount of shock and trying to deal with the chaos in my family, I was determined with my husband to start the Caring for Carcinoid Foundation. What we felt was that we could assemble a group of top researchers and a terrific board of directors in order to make a push that was very aggressive and continues to be very aggressive, to have a structured business plan to achieve our goal, a structured scientific roadmap to achieve our goal. And the goal of the Caring for Carcinoid Foundation, the mission, is to discover targeted therapies and an eventual cure for carcinoid cancer. Our vision is to eliminate the suffering of carcinoid patients and related neuroendocrine patients, their families, and their caregivers. We devote 100% of our individual donations to scientific research that's devoted to supporting carcinoid and related neuroendocrine tumor research. And in this way, and in others, we will find a cure for this cancer. It's not something that, at this point, I have so much cancer, a lot of people think that perhaps this is a quest to find a cure for myself. Unfortunately, I realize that the cancer has metastasized to such an extent in my body that that's impossible. But I believe firmly, and I'm dedicated to the goal of accomplishing a cure for all other patients in my lifetime. I hope to see a cure, or at least a targeted therapy, exist for all carcinoid and hopefully related neuroendocrine tumor patients in my lifetime. And we've assembled a terrific group of scientific advisors to accomplish that. They're world-renowned cancer researchers as well as world-renowned neuroendocrine tumor researchers.
Hi, I'm Ramesh Shivdasani. I'm a medical oncologist and a laboratory scientist at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, where I have for some years now been studying two different aspects of gastrointestinal cancers. On the one hand, I see patients morning a week to give a second opinion on management of various cancers of the gastrointestinal tract. But the bulk of my time is spent in laboratory research, where I study the mechanisms and the pathways by which embryos develop organs. This might sound like something that is remotely connected to cancer, if at all. And in fact, the connections are not absolutely clear to everyone who thinks about the cancer problem. It turns out that we understand very little about how cells are actually wired together, and even less about how cells come together to form a tissue and how tissues come together to create an organ. The thinking is that if we have a better understanding of how the blueprint is created, if we have a better feel for how cells talk to each other to create a tissue and how tissues maintain their stable state, then we will be much better positioned to understand what it is that goes awry to produce unrestrained growth of tumors and to produce properties that normal cells never exhibit, which is migration away from their home base and their success and thriving in an environment that is otherwise alien to them. And the combination of these two properties are what makes cancer such a dreaded disease, namely metastasis. So normally cells are destined to be born in one place and to stay there for the rest of their lives. Cancer cells, very occasionally, will break those rules. They get away from their home base, travel in the bloodstream or in lymphatic channels, and then set up shop in the liver or lungs or bone, which are the most common places for cancers to spread. And it is this that makes cancer a difficult disease to manage, because cells that are growing elsewhere do not follow simple rules and are much harder to manage, to control, than cells that are localized, because in that situation they can be surgically removed. But when they've spread, often in large numbers, a surgical approach is practically impossible. Another mystery in carcinoid tumors is what exactly is the cell of origin? What is the original cell that received the insults and learned how to break the rules? We know that carcinoid tumors of the intestine probably belong to the class of cells that normally produce hormones in that organ. But carcinoid tumors are closely related to tumors of various neuroendocrine cell types. And the precise cell that gives birth to each of these tumor types is largely unknown. And this may seem like an academic point, but it's actually very, very important. And the reason it's important to know what the cell of origin is because different tumors are going to play true to their origins. Cells are going to be largely constructed or largely instructed by their endogenous properties, by the properties that make them who they are to begin with. Once we understand what it is that a cell, what the basic rules are for that cell, then we have a much better sense of the genetic pathways, the biochemical pathways that cell finds that it's most comfortable with. Those are the pathways that make that cell what it is and are intrinsic to the properties and behaviors of that cell type. Those same rules then come into play when that cell becomes malignant. because that cell is still dependent on the very genes and pathways that made it a normal endocrine cell to begin with. So if we can understand what it is that makes that cell unique, that makes that cell produce hormones and respond to its environment, then we will be in a much better position to use targeted treatments as opposed to generic treatments. The successes, or the very prominent successes in cancer treatment, have come almost exclusively in instances where there has been a more detailed understanding of the genes and pathways that make cells what they are. More importantly, it also comes from understanding what particular mutations and changes occur in particular tumor types so that they can become malignant. And it is with the confluence of that knowledge, of the rules that make a cell what it is, the understanding of the genes and biochemical pathways that contribute to a cell's normal behavior, and the mutations that particular cells accumulate en route to becoming tumors. The confluence of those three bases of understanding are what will ultimately result in targeted, successful treatment of tumors like carcinoid tumor, and that is the basis for much of what we do in the research laboratory and the kinds of advances that we hope and expect to bring into the clinic in the foreseeable future.
My name is Matt Cook. I'm a medical oncologist here at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. And my interest over the past 10 years has been not only treating patients with carcinoid tumors, but also discovering novel therapies and investigating ways in which to improve the treatment of patients with carcinoid tumors, which historically has really been fairly limited. I think patients with neuroendocrine tumors actually do have a number of treatment options. There are a number of standard options for patients. These include treatment with somatostatin analogs like octreotide or lanreotide. Treatment with alpha interferon can also be beneficial, as can certain types of surgery and even a procedure called embolization of metastases to the liver. So these are all treatments that are available to patients outside of a study setting. At the same time, at least right now, many of the newer agents, and particularly many of the targeted agents, are available only in clinical trial settings or investigational settings. So from a patient perspective, it can be very beneficial to consider clinical trials as a means of getting access to some of these new promising drugs. The truth is we don't know yet whether all of these new targeted agents are in fact going to be proven successful in treating carcinoid patients, even though we're quite excited about it. There are very large trials right now going on for the very first time to demonstrate, hopefully, efficacy of some of these new targeted agents. If that happens, many of these new treatments will become commercially available and easily available to patients with carcinoid and other neuroendocrine tumors. So it's been really actually a fascinating history and fascinating story over the past 10 years. When I first started treating patients with carcinoid tumors, it was really a backwater of medical treatment and medical research. All we really had at that time were some of the very standard chemotherapy treatments, and many of the standard chemotherapy treatments have really been have not been terribly successful in treating patients with carcinoid tumors. What's happened over the past several years is that there's really been a revolution, not only in cancer care in general, but also in the treatment of patients for carcinoid. And that revolution has really come from the development of some of these novel targeted therapies. What's been perhaps most fascinating is that many of these targeted therapies are not necessarily particularly active in many of the more common cancers, but seem to have some unique activity, particularly in patients with carcinoid tumors.
Hello, I'm Dr. Andrew Leiter at the Division of Gastroenterology at the University of Massachusetts Medical School in Worcester, Massachusetts. Today I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the major research developments towards understanding carcinoid tumors, endocrine tumors of the gastrointestinal tract. First of all, this is a field that I would say has both modest advances with many remaining challenges still ahead. The good news is that earlier diagnosis in time to surgically cure carcinoid tumors in some parts of the GI tract, like the stomach and large intestine, have gotten better due to advances in endoscopy and routine screening for colorectal cancer by colonoscopy. Furthermore, there's been considerable improvements in the imaging of carcinoid tumors, resulting in earlier diagnosis. Finally, there have been some promising but very preliminary results suggesting that somatostatin receptor targeted radiotherapy has some promise for significantly prolonging the course and quality of life in patients who have advanced carcinoid disease that is otherwise incurable. The challenges, however, are many. There's an increasing incidence in the lung, colon, and other gastrointestinal sites that's not well understood now. Furthermore, there's relatively little progress in making an early diagnosis and the treatment of small intestinal carcinoids, which are often associated with the sickest of patients. In addition, diagnosis continues to be delayed for many years in many of the cases. Symptoms are frequently attributed to other common benign diseases. Tumors are usually surgically incurable by the time of diagnosis. There is no highly effective chemotherapy for disseminated disease that cannot be cured by surgery. Finally, there's relatively little understanding of the biology of the cells in the GI tract that give rise to carcinoids, and that may slow the discovery of new and novel biological therapies. There have been some important developments in understanding and research on carcinoid tumors in the last year. I'd like to tell you a little bit about a neuroendocrine tumor carcinoid summit conference that was held at the National Institutes of Health in September 2007 under the auspices of the National Cancer Institute. The NCI invited an expert panel of basic scientists and clinical researchers to review the current status of clinical and basic research in the field. The conference consisted of presentations by the invited panel, breakout sessions to assess specific aspects, and the production of the panel's conclusions, the presentation of the panel's conclusions and recommendations to the NCI. The conclusions and recommendations of the panel were as follows, and they focused on 4 areas: diagnosis and management, identification of novel therapeutic strategies, understanding neuroendocrine cell biology, and the integration of clinical strategy. The conclusions were that there is relatively little solid information to address each of the major themes, and that additional research funding was sorely needed. The progress in treating many types of carcinoids has been disappointing. This slide here just illustrates the overall 5-year survival in patients with carcinoid tumors from several different GI sites over a 20-year period, showing relatively little improvement over a long period of time. These results are disappointing and point the need for more research. Also, we don't really understand it, but for reasons not known, there's an increasing incidence, quite dramatic in fact, for several types of carcinoid tumors, in particular ones of the lung and bronchial tree, the small intestine, and the rectum. This is not understood, but it's becoming a more common disease than ever before. There have been some recent developments in science that I think are likely to increase the interest in carcinoid diagnosis and research, and perhaps attract more outstanding scientists to the field. It's been recently recognized that GI hormones have a pivotal role in common major health problems in the USA. Two of these are very widespread: diabetes and obesity. It was discovered a number of years ago that insulin-producing cells in the pancreas are regulated by intestinal hormone cells, making the pancreas an important target, and has led to the development of some novel therapies for diabetes. Furthermore, it's now been shown that intestinal hormones directly act on the brain, in particular parts of the brain that are involved in the regulation of food intake, whether it's to eat too much or too little. And this certainly has important implications for obesity, which affects a major part of the United States population. Without going into a lot of detail, this is just schematically illustrated here, the role of gut hormones in the brain. This wiring diagram shows that in the colon, there's a hormone that acts on the hypothalamus, where food intake is regulated. The stomach secretes a major hormone, ghrelin, and in addition, there are hormones secreted from fat tissue and the pancreas that all affect this appetite regulation center. And there isn't time to go into greater depth now, but this is a very, very intensely studied area now. I want to say a little bit about my own research interests. I've spent most of my career studying the properties of gastrointestinal endocrine cells. And at this point, we believe that little is known about serotonin-producing endocrine cells in the GI tract, the very cells that are supposed to give rise to carcinoids. The Leiter lab studies differentiation of GI endocrine cells. This is the process where specific genes are sequentially turned on at just the right time and place to make a cell become a serotonin cell. An important feature of these cells is they become differentiated as they usually stop dividing. In contrast, cancer cells have mutations that don't block the ongoing uncontrolled cell division that doesn't take place in mature cells. So there's a little bit of a contrast here, but these are intimately linked to the kinds of studies currently underway in my laboratory. There are several genes that have been identified that have a role in the development of gastrointestinal endocrine cells. These are three related proteins, a very early one called MAF1, neurogenin-3, and neuro-D, with neuro-D really being the very latest stage of differentiation of endocrine cells in the gut, and for practical purposes, neurogenin-3 being a very early stage. Without going into a lot of experimental details, to try and determine where these cells come from, we did a cell marking experiment, which is schematically illustrated here, to identify the cells that come from neurogenin-3. They're shown here in blue. This is a way that cells are permanently marked so one can find out where they came from, irrespective of what they become. And what we found is neurogenin-3 expressing cells can occasionally become enterocytes, non-endocrine cells, but most endocrine cells appear to arise from neurogenin-3 cells. However, there was one exception to this rule, and that's shown in the rightmost part of the panel here, and that's the cells that make serotonin. About half of the intestinal cells that make serotonin do not arise from neurogenin-3, but probably from a novel and previously uncharacterized pathway. It's interesting because these are potentially the very cells that cause carcinoids or become carcinoids. So, having told you a little bit about some of the interests of our laboratory, I'd like to say a little bit about the future. We would like to determine what genes activate cells to become serotonin-producing cells independently of neurogenin-3, and then ask the question, can we identify a genetic signature for each of these two kinds of cells? We hope to develop a sorely needed animal model for carcinoid tumors, which at current doesn't exist. We would like to determine why neuro-D cells don't respond to signaling to become tumors, and what does that have to do with carcinoids? And which of the serotonin cells give rise to carcinoid tumors? The ones from neurogenin-3, the neurogenin-3 independent ones, or who knows what? Many questions need to be answered. At this point, I'd like to acknowledge the people who made this work possible. My research would not be possible without the generous support from a research grant from the Caring for Carcinoid Foundation. I think it is especially important to point out that with the NIH budget shrinking, that many projects go unfunded and many promising scientists are leaving the field. It's especially important now that that people help support foundations like Caring for Carcinoid to help ensure that this work and other work related to carcinoid will flourish. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lauren Erb, and I'm honored to serve as the Executive Director of the Caring for Carcinoid Foundation. Having lost family members to cancer, I am thrilled to be part of such a groundbreaking organization that supports not only patients, but their friends, family, and caregivers as well. Like many of you, I was struck by Nancy O'Hagan's story, and in particular of her aggressive, focused path to a cure. Since inception, the Caring for Carcinoid Foundation has already awarded over $2 million to leading scientists whose research is already making great strides. As a lifelong swimmer and former MIT swim captain, I am excited to lead our first ever team in the Swim Across America Boston Harbor Swim. This year's team includes not only my former teammates and friends, but also, amazingly, leading neuroendocrine clinician Dr. Matthew Kulke. I am excited to swim with Dr. Kulke and my friends to raise much-needed funds and awareness for carcinoid as part of this amazing event.
All right, so we're here at the Swim Across America Boston Harbor Swim. We just spent a whole day out on a boat. We had a great day. It was a lot of fun, and we look forward to doing the swim in the future. We had a great team of MIT swimmers, master swimmers, Dr. Kulke of Dana-Farber, and a lot of other enthusiastic people. We raised over $10,000 for the Caring for Carcinoid Foundation today, so we're really grateful for everyone's support, and we look forward to doing it again next year.
This year will be the Caring for Carcinoid Foundation's third year participating in the Pan Mass Challenge. This event has been highly successful for us, and each year we raise over $250,000. This year in 2008, we have a 51-member strong team that we hope will raise $300,000 for carcinoid and related neuroendocrine tumors research. For those of you that bike, this is a great opportunity to get involved with the foundation. It's an incredibly fun event. It's a fun-filled day spent riding with your teammates and other supporters, and it's really a truly memorable experience, and all those that have participated have nothing but great things to say about it.
We just finished the ride, and I'm so grateful for my teammates. We have two here, Jeff and Leslie, and the other 49 riders. I'm so grateful to everybody for really pulling together for the Caring for Carcinoid Foundation. We couldn't do it without the riders, and I know all of us are really rooting for the members of our team who have carcinoid and neuroendocrine cancer. And I know for me, my dad's spirit was riding my handlebars, and I'm just so grateful for this event and what we can do for the Caring for Carcinoid Foundation.
Hi, Craig Berkson. Awesome day. This is an incredible event. Caring for Carcinoid is really an excellent cause, and it's great to be able to ride for it. And team members have been great, and it's really just helped so much to have people who knew it was going and cared about the same cause to really come together. I've learned a lot about the carcinoid that I've got and the kinds of things people are working on, and really looking forward to raising money and finding a cure for it. So thanks, and hopefully we'll do this again next year.
It was an awesome ride. Michael Coburn, and I'm riding for my wife Heidi, who's a carcinoid survivor. And we had a fantastic ride, great weather, great day, first century, and I had my brother-in-law here, John, from San Diego, came in to do it with me.
My sister's Heidi, she has carcinoid, so I'm here to support her. It's been great fun, great day, met lots of great people.
We're also so lucky to have sponsorship from people who are willing to write us checks for $20, and we have organizations like Molecular Insights Pharmaceuticals that's really willing to put their money out there, as well as other sponsors who back us and make it possible for us to have these great shirts and to do this ride. So really grateful for that.
My name is Cheryl Poole, and this is my mom. When she was diagnosed with carcinoid cancer, I went to meet her oncologist to find out what treatment options were available. I was stunned when he suggested that I called hospice and told me there was nothing they could do. We went from her previous diagnosis that she had irritable bowel syndrome to a diagnosis of no hope, just like that. When I spoke with other friends who were doctors, I became even more confused when they told me that carcinoid was extremely slow-growing and indolent. How could it be a slow-growing cancer but there be no effective treatment? As I began to do my own research, I was so fortunate to meet members of the Caring for Carcinoid Foundation. There were patients who had stories so similar to my mom's who shared their information and stories and email addresses with me. There were doctors who truly understood the disease, who said, send your medical files and bring your mom up, we'd be happy to see her. There were survivors who told their inspiring stories. There were family members who could empathize with me in a way that no one else could. There was up-to-date information and research about current treatments and medications and procedures. There was energy and warmth and support and information and hope. What I would say to each of you is to advocate for yourself and to advocate for greater awareness and funding and research and the work of the Caring for Carcinoid Foundation. This is only an unknown, underfunded orphan cancer if we let it be.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm very pleased that everyone has learned more about the Caring for Carcinoid Foundation. We here at the Caring for Carcinoid Foundation want to create a community for patients of hope, of positivity, and of caring. We want everyone to leave here today feeling less panic, less uncertainty, and more hope and realization that each day the future will be brighter and each day your future will be better. We are here working hard for you, and we want to know how to support you. And one thing I'd like to mention an explanation of is why the Caring for Carcinoid Foundation chose the sunflower. The reason why we chose the sunflower as our symbol is because it's such a symbol of hope, of caring. It is a symbol throughout history that symbolizes longevity, of hopefulness, of warmth, and of healing. And sunflowers also turn and follow the sun, and the sun is such a healing force for all of us when we go outside and we feel active and energetic, and we can go for a walk and feel the sun on our face and the wind in our hair. And it's for this reason that we chose the sunflower. And I also felt that it was such a wonderful symbol because when you look at an enormous field of sunflowers, it's a great metaphor for the Caring for Carcinoid Foundation. We are one foundation, but we are comprised of so many wonderful, supportive, generous, and happy individuals. Together, we will all make a difference. And I'm so grateful to each of you for listening to this video and for reaching out to us and letting us know how we can care for you. Thank you. For more information, please visit our website, www.caringforcarcinoid.org. Thank you very much.